Good morning and welcome to this Higher Space hosted virtual meeting, which will take your morning. And thank you for joining. We thought it very appropriate to start with the government's response to what is happening to us as individuals and to us as business leaders and to us as event professionals today. So I'm very pleased that Felicity from Higher Space has put these two gentlemen up first on our panel. So we have Michael Hurst, who many of you know, who's been leading lobbying work on government for many years and has been at his desk working hard for the industry over the last days. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning to you. Hi.
And also Martin, who you will know, who's been not just live in his own media context, but also on national news, representing the viewpoint of the industry as well. So let's start with a couple of questions for these panelists, please. Michael, I'm going to come to you perhaps predictably first to ask for an update on what is happening in terms of our lobbying of government and their response. Can I ask you for that comment first, please?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. First of all, let me express my deepest sympathy to all those who've been affected by the virus, especially to those in the events community. My heart goes out to you. Yeah, we're working really very hard, and we're very well connected with government. We have the Business Visits and Events Partnership, which of course is the umbrella group. There are over 20 trade associations. This, incidentally, is the time for you to get with your trade association. It's the best way to have your concerns properly recognized and fed into the system that we've got set up. So the trade associations meet together, we find common cause, we present that through to government departments. We sit on three distinct committees. One is the Tourism Immediate Emergency Response Group, TIER, which has a weekly meeting, but it has a daily briefing, and the minister attends the weekly meetings. The minister being Nigel Huddleston, who is the Minister for Tourism, under which our sector currently sits. Nigel Huddleston is also on the government's COBRA committee, so he can feed our concerns directly in to the government committee dealing with the crisis, and that committee, of course, is chaired by the Prime Minister. We're also represented around the Tourism Industry Council table. Again, that is a ministerial-led group, and the BVEP, through myself as chair of the Events Industry Board, has got 4 representatives who sit directly on that board. So there's an enormous platform for the industry to make its representations known and to make its case heard. And we're working tirelessly as the member trade associations feed into us. We feed up the government, and we do get responses. I have to say, the officials within the Department of Culture, Media and Sport are working extraordinarily hard on our behalf.
And it is true to say, isn't it, that we are now in the conversation and being referenced as the event industry, as opposed to a miscellaneous number of supply chain businesses. The event industry is now, unfortunately, as a result of this, a more concrete thing.
Yeah, I'm really pressing everybody to get underneath the events industry umbrella. It's a £70 billion industry. It employs 700,000 people, and it's a half of the visitor economy. And apart from that, of course, in terms of business events, the trade, the exports, the inward investment, the cultural cohesion that we bring to the United Kingdom can account for over 150 billion. So it's a really valuable sector of the economy. And of course, it will be the sector of economy that is useful to the government. In fact, it's not only useful, it's imperative to the government to use when we come into the recovery phase. Many believe that it's through the platform of events that we can kickstart Britain again after this virus has been beaten.
So let me ask you then one more question, because you know a lot of people who are listening today, and a lot of people who are leading events businesses are either on furlough or they're dealing with people and putting people on furlough. Terrible word, one that we didn't know what it meant up until a couple of weeks ago, and now it's an everyday parlance. What can we expect next from the government in terms of support? Is there an extension of that furlough period to come?
Well, what we're getting, of course, is updates on an almost daily basis of the government guidelines relative to the key schemes. The key schemes, of course, are the guaranteed loan schemes. We understand that the Chancellor will be making further announcements this Friday, tomorrow, with regards to how those loan schemes should be applied by the banks. The banks haven't been playing ball. There will be new directives to them. Then we have the employment support packages, which includes the furloughing of staff. We believe that there needs to be greater flexibility there, that staff need to find some way of volunteering back to their employer, especially in the events sector, where you might not have any business at the present time, but you are still planning ahead, maybe 6 months or a year. So you need people working, although at the moment there's no cash flow coming in. The business rates relief scheme, currently local authorities are taking different views as to whether event venues are included in those schemes. The scheme specifically says that places of public gathering are included, and we are now trying to get the definition changed so that the words exhibition and conference and events are specifically within the guidance. The big omission at the present time is the small businesses which form part of the supply chain. They're not covered other than within the self-employed provisions that have been announced by government. We need to get the supply chain, and it's no good having venues protected when you might re-emerge after the virus without any suppliers being able to supply the venues that are still intact. So we're working very hard to get the government and the Treasury to recognize that the supply chain needs support, a lot of it. And we're at the moment collating some data and statistics to hope that they might respond favorably to the pleas. This is across incidentally all sectors: retail, manufacturing, logistics. Everybody is complaining that the supply chains have been missed out.
Okay, thank you. So on that note, Martin, I'm going to come to you. Martin, you've been actually on national networks speaking about how this situation is impacting the events industry. So, and you've been quite vocal, and thank you. But let me give the word to you now to respond, if you could please, in terms of the government response and where you might think it's lacking still.
I'm obviously, extremely supportive of everything Michael and the BVEP has done, and I'd like to think we've been, following every step of the way. And I can't really disagree with anything Michael said, other than kind of reaffirm and repeat. I think that as the events industry has always struggled with a clear identity, I think that's due in part to the diversity of different businesses and aspects to it. I mean, of course, venues and agencies and the deep-rooted supply chain that would supply anything from catering items to, portable phone booths, which you can have your pictures taken in and that sort of stuff. It's very difficult to group all of that together. And as far as an agency is concerned, you can have one full service creative agency and one venue finding agency. They're both agencies in the events industry, but actually they have nothing in common as businesses. So it's quite confusing for perhaps a lot of government officials to even understand that themselves. If this had happened about 3 years ago, I think I'd be a bit more worried, but I've seen the incremental steps that BVEP and the other trade associations have taken in that time. And I'm quietly confident that we're actually starting to listen. And I think this, the current situation where we've seen our major venues become hospitals has actually resonated with the public. Everyone seems to be amazed that Excel has been turned into a hospital. Exactly.
We're looking and thinking that happens all the time.
I mean, at Excel, that could be happening 4 separate exhibitions at once. That could be happening. And it's fantastic. You're amazed, but that skill set, that talent, that's been there all along.
So specifically, what do you think government should be doing next? I asked that question to Michael, so fair that I ask it to you, because there's some very good examples globally of how the event industry globally is going to respond as we come out of this.
As Michael correctly said, events are the facilitator of growth, and we exist to support other industries. We don't always look after ourselves, but we look after others. That fact cannot be ignored. What I would urge is that the government takes a look at what Hong Kong have done and have provided small, medium-sized businesses with, I think it's about $1,300 equivalent, specifically to go and exhibit at a trade show relevant to their industry. That could be, I'm sure, implemented through some sort of voucher scheme or some sort of simple process that would really help give these businesses a kickstart to get back in front of their audiences, which we, of course, as an industry would facilitate.
And they're also facilitating some free of charge venue provision as well, aren't they, for the international?
Yes, I don't know all the specific details country to country, but certainly the likes of Denmark provided, I think it was a 12 million euro fund specifically for events. I think Germany have done something similar. I think we are lacking behind some of our European cousins with regards to acknowledging the power of the events industry. So I'm hoping the government will listen. But I think, you know, what they could do first off, at some point at the lectern, just acknowledge our existence. Just say events industry. Let us know that they know we exist.
Yeah, and I think that's the work that Michael and others have been doing, and I think is beginning, as you say, to pay off, and the difference between now and 3 years ago perhaps as well. So finally, both of you, just before I let you go, I suppose there's a question, really the burning question. We're event planners and we function better when we have a timeline than when we don't. So, of course, what we're missing at the moment is a timeline. So what's your view, Michael, to you first, perhaps, on the timeline for a possible recovery?
Well, I mean, that's how long is a piece of string. We've done some survey work through Visit Britain. 74% of all events have been postponed to the last quarter. So there's some confidence that we might see, you know, the proper recovery during that period. What we do need, and we're emphasizing this also to government, although we recognize it's difficult for them to provide it, is some confident messaging, a better understanding when the restrictions will be lifted. We don't think they'll be lifted in one go. We think it'll be a more gradual lifting of the social distancing restrictions, which could mean that, you know, the larger events come last, and smaller events are allowed at the outset. But just going back to Martin's points, I mean, the recovery package needs to be bold. It needs to be ambitious. We need to do better than Hong Kong and Singapore and Sydney. We need a very, very strong marketing push through Visit Britain. We need to see tax incentives across the board for both businesses and for our customers. Some packages of subvention. Yep, I agree that the Hong Kong example is good, but maybe we should have free venue accommodation for 12 months. Restructuring of government's entire approach and policy towards the industry is also on our menu of requests.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Martin, if I had to put you on the ropes on that same question, timeline?
I think that certainly, but I'm only basing this on the conversations I've had on Zoom over the last couple of weeks, but I would urge caution against this idea that there'll just be a switch where everything will turn back on in a few months. As Michael says, it will be incremental. It will come back in stages. Realistically, it's very difficult to see how this is going to blow over any time before the end of June. I think we'll start to see internal conferences, internal communications happen first before we move to external events. However, I think exhibitions specifically are going to struggle particularly with our major venues currently occupied as hospitals until, by the sounds of it, as early as October. That's the earliest we might get them back. Where are these big events going to go? With everything squeezed into Q3 and 4, have we got a supply chain to cope with that pressure? I don't think we do. Have we got the space for all these events? I'm, again, not so sure. So I would urge caution. It will be a slow comeback, but I'm afraid that's all I've got for you.
Good. Okay. No, I think there's some consensus that we will come back more slowly than we went down. Is how people are expressing it to me. Thank you both very much, gentlemen. Ed, can I come to you just very quickly and see if we've had comments on this particular topic on the chat room?
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. So the most upvoted question at the moment is, what is the one most important thing the government could do to help the events industry right now?
The supply chain. I think we've got to save the supply chain. As I said earlier, if we come back into business activity again and we haven't got the supply chain, then we're not going to be able to put on the events.
Thank you to Michael and to Martin. I mean, you know, a very factual account of where we are now. I think the takeaways that I have are: be authentic, be yourself, be kind, above all, to other people. At this moment in time, you don't know how the crisis is impacting on people who you're working with and colleagues, but that there is light at the end of the tunnel, Richard, not a train coming towards us the other way, and that the event industry is an extraordinarily resilient group of people, and there will be good times ahead for all, including venues, moving forward as we navigate our way out of this situation. Thank you all very much indeed. Have a super rest of day. Take care, and we'll see you through another higher space opportunity very soon. Thanks a million.